feel that sun blazing overhead, as it always does in these here parts. High noon is approaching, and there's a locomotive running amok that we here have to put down like my sister's poor labradoodle. This ain't no ordinary train, though, oh no siree. This here iron horse is a plot train, representing the story of some poor writer/conductor that's gone off the rails, overwhelming the narrative. That's why us, this town's two finest story deputies, have to stop this train before it crashes into Revision Ravine. Oh yes, it's up to me, old David, and my trusted partner, MacDonald.
Hey, stop fidgeting, you fleabag! I've had enough of your nonsensical horsing around, horse. Ugh, what's with all these bugs everywhere? And why is it so freaking hot? God, being a cowboy sucks.
Easy there, partner. This is just the way of the West. It's hotter than hell and full of dust and grime, but it's home.
I don't know, old David. I feel like I was born in the wrong century. I just want to sit down in my room and do nothing. You know, play on the telegraph machine and write stories about dinosaurs on my typewriter. Hey, have you heard about that Bone Wars thing going on now?
Never mind that, MacDonald. We've got a plot train to stop. Then we can go to the saloon and celebrate our victory. I'm gonna have a round of hard whiskey. What about you, partner?
I think I'll have an iced tea. With some sugar, you know? Maybe a lemon?
Aha! There comes the train over yonder. Get ready to ride.
Wait, which one's yonder?
Hi-ho, Gold Blazer, away!
Yeah, you and Gold Blazer go, I'll catch up. Come on, Kip and Poop, get moving. Go, you filthy animal. Ride, mosh, away, forward, go!
We're right next to the train. Now we can hear the runaway plop with the chugging smoke.
And he said, I love you. And she said, but I don't love you. And he said, I'll prove my love. And she said, that won't make me love you. And he said, I'll gather every iris bloom I can find, since irises are your favorite flower, and deliver them to you every— Wow, we gotta stop this plot train. It's definitely going off the rails.
Right, Gold Blazer. Yeah! Yeah!
Faster, Kip and Poop. God, why can't I have a car or something?
We're by the locomotive now, partner. Leap onto its side.
Oh God, I'm not ready for this. I'm no action hero. I'm just a dork with a hat and a gun. Why do I have a gun? I can't be trusted with this thing. I might mistake it for my toothbrush and blow my head off.
You might need to use that gun soon, MacDonald. We're gonna have to hold up the rider/conductor.
Hold up? I don't want to shoot anybody.
It's the West, you blazing fool!
I hate the Wild West!
Just leap onto the locomotive, like this.
That's some great onomatopoeic words there. Fine, here I go.
Alright, we've made it on board the locomotive. This plot train's still running hard, I can hear.
And she said, stop bothering me. And he said, a moment away from your gaze, an eternity passed. And she said, stop with the Shakespeare crap. And he said, alas, poor folk, I knew you well. And she said, I'm gonna file a restraining order against you. God, we gotta stop this plot train. It's gone too far. Look, there's the writer/conductor.
Oh, I love this story. I love all the drama. I must keep this going and going on and on and on. Ooh, I love this dramatic plot. What's gonna happen next? I don't know. Let's keep going forever!
Hold up there, rider/conductor. Stop this train or we'll shoot you.
He'll shoot you. I'll just point my fingers and say, pew, pew, pew.
I'll never stop this plot train. This story's too compelling.
It's a runaway train. You keep this plot going and it'll go smokestack first into Revision Ravine.
You can't stop me. I love this story. I must keep it on track.
Don't worry, old David. I got this. I'll just go to the coal works here and take care of this. Stop, train, stop!
You embarrass yourself, MacDonald. Rider/conductor, I'm gonna count to 3. 1,
Never. I must keep this plot going.
2.
I refuse. The drama must go on.
3.
Oh, what a jolt. No, wait! The plot train is slowing down!
And here comes Revision Ravine. Hope this slows down fast enough. And he said, maybe I should leave. And she said, maybe you should. And he said, I suppose you are not interested in the rule of relationships is consent.
Hey, howdy, hey, it stopped like a quarter of an inch away from the end of the tracks. Rider/conductor, you're under arrest for nearly driving this runaway plot train into Revision Ravine.
Oh, shoot! Darn it, I love that plot! But I suppose it's best to keep the story from having to be revised. How did the train even stop, anyway?
Oh, well, while you guys were having your little kerfuffle, I just pulled this lever over here.
Oh, well, good job, partner. And now we shall ride into the sunset after a nice celebratory round of whiskey and sweet tea at the saloon, and with our jobs done and justice served. Never before in the history of this wide frontier have 2-story deputies been so successful, so beloved, and so dashingly yellow-toothed and hair full of manure, and their names have been carved into the great legends of the West. Let's ride, dear partner, and saddle up for another legendary day tomorrow.
Yeah, you have fun with that. I'm gonna retire and sit in my room at the telegraph machine, read up more on the Bone Wars and such. Welcome, fellow nerds, to another episode of The Ritwit, the show where the lead skit writer, Matt Donald, aka me, completely forgot that Halloween was just around the corner and didn't write a Halloween or horror-themed skit like I did for the last 2 years. We're so professional, aren't we?
Yes, always professional. The very essence of professionalism.
That's us! How are you celebrating Halloween over there in Japan?
Halloween is actually becoming more popular in Japan, but let me say, as somebody who has stopped caring about trick-or-treating long, long ago, I am very grateful that I live in an apartment complex on the 4th floor.
People
Nobody's
not
literally coming to
yeah,
my
no
door.
one comes up? Okay.
Nope. That said, kids, of course, love dressing in costumes, but the older folks don't really understand the purpose because they cribbed it from America.
Right.
Like the whole costume, garish, trick-or-treating thing.
Well, I think it's just a nice way to be kind of creative in a way and just...
You have the opportunity to choose what costumes you wear, and I suppose that there's some of that in
Like, I don't
in
really
Japan,
care
of
for
course.
trick-or-treating because I actually don't really care for candy too much. Like, I haven't trick-or-treated in a while either, but I love the costume aspect. I love making a costume, being with friends, and like doing like a little photo shoot. Those are fun.
Sure. I seem to remember a certain serial killer
Yes.
costume when he used a cereal box. It was amazing.
That was quite popular. Yes, I was... This year, actually, I
But
found a
anyway.
tutorial on how to make different masks from Bionicle out of, like, paper materials,
Like-
so I'm going to...
paper mache, paper crafting.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a mask and get, like, a weapon or so from Spirit of Halloween or something, and, like... so I might be thinking about being a Bionicle character. I just think it'd be fun, because I'm a huge dork, you know? So-
You are a massive Bionicle fan, so much so that Hero Factory is like scum of the earth to you for taking away your beloved product.
You know, the sets for Hero Factory were okay, but yeah...
All right, the story was crap. Anyway,
Yeah, but like, but too bad I didn't buy Bionicle for the I didn't like Bionicle for the sets. I liked it for the story. So yeah, Hero Factory can go to hell. But-
Yeah, well, anyways, but obviously Japan is, I don't want to say it's the place where cosplay started, but it's certainly
it's certainly
it's certainly
a place where it got
prominent
popular.
niche. It's not that common, but it is certainly, like, they're passionate when they do it. So they do enjoy dressing up here. And they probably enjoy candy and
imagine.
chocolate.
I mean,
the candy is probably not
all
the
the
same.
different. Well, I mean, like all the different anime characters they can
Yep.
be.
I mean, you could be an anime character if you wanted, if you care.
I guess that's true. There's no stopping us, but they have easier access to all of them. So
That is certainly true, especially for toys, without major fees for shipping. Anyhow, enough about Halloween. I did mention a word. I wanted to use this word earlier, and I avoided it on purpose because it's time for our vocabulary vitamin of the month.
Yes.
And this
I'm ready to take my vitamins.
And this month's vitamin happens to be the word epitome. E-P-I-T-O-M-E. And yes, I did pronounce it the same way that Donald just failed not that recently, but when I first saw the word, I pronounced it epitome. So
yeah, I know. I'm kind of making fun of that. Oh, it's an epitome of stuff.
An epic tome of nothing. Poetry collection.
It's the epitome of mispronounced words.
Yeah, right. The epitome, for a simple definition, the best example. So what I wanted to say was, we are the epitome of professionalism, aren't we, Donald?
We certainly are.
Anyway, here's a sample sentence for you. And yes, this does come from something that I watched recently. This line is original, by the way. It's based on something I watched recently. Sorry, clarification.
Oh, okay, good. You're not completely ripping it off.
No, I didn't just steal it. She was the epitome of grace. Long as she got the part she wanted.
Wait, where'd you find that quote about me?
So, get out there and take your vitamin, listeners. Until next set, when we come back with another word. If you'd like to send us those examples, those places you've used them, we'd love to hear what you have to say. You see your stories a little bit. So if you use it, send an email.
Hey, you want to hear how I used the word defenestrate last time?
Other than your sample sentence, you actually used it?
Dang it, you stole my joke. That's the only time I've used it.
Speaking of stolen jokes, fun tangent. There was a vocal group that did a concert, and they had a break between songs where they brought up this joke and had this one member lost his entire library to a fire. Said, and he's like, "Yeah, both books."
Wow.
that was the whole library. And then somebody from the audience pipes up and says, "Even the ones that weren't colored in."
Oh, God. That's pretty good.
And the group stops. And the guy says, "You stole my joke."
That's not fun when your audience at a stand-up thing, like, takes your joke before you do it. That's great.
Yeah. It's especially when it's a really intimate setting. And speaking of intimate settings, we're going to talk today about minimalist casts.
Well, I was actually going to say, and if you want to learn a little bit more about stand-up.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really talk like how to do stand-up. We just talked about it last week. So
if you want to hear the tiniest bit about stand-up, listen to our last episode of The Ritwit.
I was going to say episode 61 if you need a number.
All right, fine.
But yes. So we talked about one character. Well, okay, we talked a very brief bit about one character's stories.
We mostly talked about monologues.
We talked more about one character's. We talked about one character's scenes a lot, but we didn't talk about like properly what we were actually trying to do. Now this, however, is you have few characters. This is really common in theater because sometimes you just don't have the horses to pull this major production, right?
Right.
So, I think that our numbers might be a little bit different, but the notes we have here, I tend to agree with this. This is anywhere from like 2 to 6 characers as a
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Well, I mean, you wrote this note, so.
Yes, I did.
So, we'll do a little bit of analysis. What are the benefits of having such a limited cast?
Hey, how about I ask the questions because you're the first one that's on our notes here.
All right. Peek behind the curtain. We're so professional. The epitome of unprofessionalism. All right, anyway.
So, David.
Yes.
What do you think are the benefits of having such a limited cast?
Well, aside from literal casting purposes, when you are crunched for numbers, like I mentioned a bit. I believe that this allows you major focus on your characters rather than sacrificing depth for width. I mean, if you think of all the characters in your story standing in a line, you'll understand the visual I'm going for here.
Yeah.
Obviously, casting, in high school, I was in a play, and actually Donald came to see it. You know which one I'm talking about.
Urinetown, right?
Yes, because I actually acted 2 different characters.
Oh, that's right, you did. Because I remember your first character got killed off pretty early on.
Exactly, because the first character didn't see much more than like the opening few scenes, and so to keep using me, the show actually calls for this double casting thing, where I had another role. So, you know, it's not like, okay, you're done, go home, even though we aren't even at intermission. So, but the other purpose is like, well, okay, sorry, that is the purpose. You can double cast people to do different characters if it works out that way. And with this kind of a cast, this size of a cast, you can have more characters by giving one person more to do.
Yeah. But I'd argue it's probably harder to double cast if you have fewer characters. So
yes, if you have this few characters, it does require you to do far more legwork on each character, so that they are fully realized, that they are more dynamic, or that they evolve more, if that makes sense.
Right.
Which obviously is never a bad thing.
Of course.
Even if it's time consuming.
Yeah.
To do all the prep.
Right.
You don't have as... What am I trying... Oh, okay. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I didn't
your
have
notes are a
enough
little
on my note
bit
here.
oddly worded here.
Yes, it is very oddly worded. So...
The epitome, one might say, of oddly worded now.
You want to hear how I've used our vocabulary vitamin word this month?
You're just
right
gonna
here.
you're going to defenestrate me, aren't you, if I keep this up?
No, I'm good. I'm not in a place where I can do that.
I guess the words are a bit superlative, aren't they?
Yes, superlative words, which is why we do them. Anyhow.
Alright, that's all 3. Wait until we have 50 of those, and I tried...
Okay, we better stop adding on this joke while we can. With characters, you have archetypes, right?
Yes.
And even if you use archetypes, a cast of this size, you aren't going to have as much crossover between characters.
Right.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
You know, if you have 5 jocks out of a 6-person cast, they're too similar.
Exactly, yeah. You want to make them all
but
different
you have,
this small,
But you have way more room to change them because you don't need to... because you have all of these different kinds of characters that you can use, but your cast is smaller in number, so you can make them more various.
Right.
That's kind of nice.
It is nice. Well, like...
The fledgling... sorry, go ahead.
No. I thought you were done, but you're not, so...
I'm not, but you can make a valid point by any means. Please.
I was just going to start reading mine, so that's why I'm
but
not.
I am not done. Okay.
Yeah,
So, the fledgling writer has a simpler time controlling the action if the cast is smaller.
Yeah.
You can... And... It's a lot easier to balance your commitment to each face if there are fewer faces.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's like... Yeah, no, you can not only focus on, like, characters more, you can add more focus to each character. Rather than, like, if you have, like, a bigger cast, you could, like... You would have only... If you want to focus really on a character with a bigger cast, you have to pick and choose which ones. Rather than this one, you can focus on, theoretically, all of them, so...
Hopefully all of them, which is the point, right?
Yeah. Like, well, I definitely agree, though, that, like, yeah, it allows the writer to squeeze the most development and depth as possible out of the characters. Like, allowing both the writer and the reader, or I guess in the stage production, viewer? The audience. Yeah, to really know them on an intimate level. While it might take the types of it might limit the types of stories you can tell, it does make the stories you do tell real character pieces. Like, you can know...
True.
All their quirks and attributes, which as a writer makes stories a lot more fun for me personally. Like, playing off of characters and what makes them is always a blast for me, and minimalist casts are great for this.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that as well.
Well,
however,
I definitely do that even in stories that aren't minimalist, though. I like to have... One of the reasons why I like to have all my characters be in groups of, like, and have different quirks is because I just like having them bounce off of each other and having them bounce off of other characters. So
well, and I am also a victim of loving banter a bit too much. I've talked about that before.
Wait till you read what I've written so far on Tesla Knots. There, you'll get to a part like,
boy.
oh my gosh, I know exactly why I did this. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Anyhow, let's take a look at the other side of the coin, though. We just talked about benefits.
Yes. Detriments now, right?
I figured you wanted to read the question.
Oh, that's right. What disadvantages lie in having a small cast like this?
I personally should have used the word you chose, which is detriments, but
Okay,
anyway.
what detriments?
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You don't have as much variety who's on the page. Even if their stories are more fleshed out like they should be, you see the same characters all the time. You don't get to see new faces.
Right.
It requires you to do more legwork on each character to be dynamic, which takes a metric ton of prep time.
Right.
You could run the opposite extreme of the gamut and, instead of having any crossover where, they have something in common, you have people with no common interests or opinions because they have to be so extremely different from each other. Like, how do you bring them together if you've got people from completely different social castes, different belief systems, and their personalities really don't match because you're trying to use more of these character archetypes? I
guess it's like the Breakfast Club sort of thing. You have a bunch of characters who are really different who happen to be in detention together.
Well, that's the connection, is they are forced together.
Right.
And, that's usually the biggest thing you see with these stories. Because if they are vastly different personality-wise, they have to be put together somehow for things to happen. I do use that a lot with my Ranger teams.
Yeah. Well,
How few is too few for a small cast? Like, I mean, obviously, we talked about 2 as a minimum because it's more than 1. But, like, for a story, you might have trouble if it's too few characters. Well, because, again, there's no variety.
Right. Well, one of the things that, like, I remember I watched this play. It's a pretty famous, famous-ish, like, musical called They're Playing Our Song. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I've never really heard it.
The cast, there's 4 people. There's 8 people in the cast, but there's only 2 characters. Maybe there's 10 people in the cast. Because the characters, they have their it's a boy, it's a man and a woman, and one of them's a lyricist, one of them is a songwriter, I think, kind of like music and lyrics.
Yeah.
But what they do is like they have these other characters that are dressed exactly the same as they are, and they're representing like their inner thoughts, so they can have dialogues, I guess, or monologues, I guess, with them, like when the other character is off. So then that way it can have a bigger cast, but
sure. Well, and
then they can have accompaniments during certain songs, right?
Yep.
And while
you can break into 3-part harmony, even though it's only the one guy.
Right. But I think I remember there were some harmonies with like certain things, but I remember it was about the 2 of them and their like adventure and their comedic sort of adventure together. But they even though there was only 2 characters, there was kind of a third, because there was this clingy ex-boyfriend of the girls named Leon. I don't remember their names, but I remember
You remember Leon?
Because they always said Leon, and all you heard about. He didn't have a cast member.
He's basically this mythologized character, and because he's so prominent in their dialogue, he basically hangs over the whole story.
Yeah, exactly. Like she talks about, she's got to do this for Leon because she's having a really hard time letting go, and like there's times like, yeah, Leon is gone, and then he's like, yeah, so is Winter, but it's coming back. Or it's like, I'm gonna have to adopt Leon, aren't I? Or like, why don't we break up? Because that way you can spend more time with me now. It's like, but then what happens later on? Like, apparently when you find out that the guy meets Leon, he's like, oh, we actually hit it off. We became really good friends. So Leon becomes a character in a way in this 2-person show, even though you never see him or hear him, and he's not cast. So,
Well, and something else that when you said there were only 2 characters, but there are like 10 actors, I was wondering if it wasn't kind of a passage of time thing.
oh,
where
that
you
is a
have
good
the
way to do
child
it too.
version,
Yeah.
the child version, and then you have the teenage version, and you have the adult version, and the senior.
No, it's not that
citizen version or
epic of a
whatever.
story, unfortunately.
I mean, it's well, but it brings up a good point that if you have a 2-character thing, that is one way you can make it have some, decent heft to the story without overextending the characters by letting time naturally pass, because as we grow and change, our opinions will also do the same. And so even if it's 2 characters that have known each other this whole time, and they generally have conversations flow the same way, and they interact with each other the same way every time, that over time, if you just see a snapshot, it's different enough.
Right. Although
So
I
there
do,
is that.
I think
I
in
hadn't
that
thought
instance,
about
though,
that
it's I don't know, the advantage of having these inner thought people, that it means that there could be like up to like 10 people on the stage, and it might not seem so lonely up there. If you
Or
have
simply as many as you want. I mean, I am horrible at remembering the name of this freaking movie, but like the one that they had the emotions and Amy Poehler and
Inside Out, yeah.
Inside Out. There we go. Inside Out. How
I was actually
every
thinking
one
more
us
of
has-
Wall-E, another Pixar one, because for the first half of the movie, there really only is 2 characters.
Fair.
I guess there's that
There's
cockroach.
that as well.
But have you seen Wall-E?
Anyway, I've seen Wall-E.
Okay.
I loved the romance, but I don't remember it terribly well because there are so many other things that I've cared more about.
Right.
Similarly, how many is not few enough for this classification? I mentioned earlier that, we all have our own ideas of what minimalist means. We both seem to think that it's up to like 6. But
I mean, I don't think. I think if you have 7, you could still probably make it. I don't know. That was just kind of a random number.
Fair. You pulled it
Yes.
out of your butt.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I suppose that's up to the creator. However, you get too big, you start getting into other stories, which we'll talk about at a later time in this set.
Yes.
But how about you, Donald? How about some detriments or disadvantages to
Well-
this kind of a cast, this size of a cast?
Well, you can't. I'd say you can't have as much of a focus on the plot. So these are mostly limited to like character-driven situations. While this is a bonus sometimes, especially for the type of writer you are, it does limit the types of stories you can tell, as I mentioned earlier in the last point. However, I think it'd be fun to work with these limitations as a challenge. Of course, each of their own. Like if you're not good with character-driven stories and can't make the most of your minimalist cast, you run the risk of severely boring the reader. Different writers have different strengths, and not every writer can pull off a story such as this. Like you really have to be comfortable.
That is true.
You really have to be comfortable with dissecting characters and making stories entertaining or meaningful with just your characters, which is not something everyone can do. So,
Yeah, it definitely requires you to have stronger characters than it does necessarily a strong plot.
yeah.
Whereas most writers have far more enjoyable times planning this grandiose plot and executing it as opposed to the character before they even start the story. Like, before I go into a story, I tend to do character sheets. It's just this quick hit, height, weight, what their appearance basically is.
I do that too.
Maybe a couple personality quirks. But with this, that is not going to be enough for your character. And because your character number is limited, the interactions that they have are crucial, which means you have to do more work with them before you can really write the story. Whereas they grow naturally as part of the plot. Well, the plot's not... The plot is almost secondary because this becomes a character-driven piece, right?
Right.
So I think that's a big issue with smaller casts like this. And as Donald already said, not every writer can pull this off. That's not a bad thing.
No, everyone has their different strengths.
So, well, now that we've talked a bit about the good and the bad, and maybe the ugly, here's the
so that's
question.
both of us as the ugly, but
Yeah, well, we haven't talked about ourselves, but I'm just saying in like these smaller cast size stories. But here's the question, I suppose, and this probably speaks to our own ideas as a writer, who we are as creators. But just put your money down. Do you prefer this size cast or a different one?
right. For me, I think I mostly prefer having larger casts, but I would like to experiment with a smaller cast such as this. Well, and to add extra points, I could figure out how to still stick to my preferred scale of stories, which is as big as epic as possible, right?
Well, I'm sorry, you can't really have the space opera thing if you have the cast of 6.
Yeah, it might be a little difficult. So instead of
Might
it being
be a little hard.
But I think it would be an interesting challenge, like to figure out some way to do it. Like I remember at one point I had a story idea in mind called Io, about a woman from Greek mythology cursed with agelessness, living centuries and centuries throughout human history up to the modern day, and even a little into the future.
Well, sure. I mean, if it's centuries.
But most of the story I had planned was focused only on 2 characters, Io herself and Kronos, the Titan of Time, who in this version cursed her to begin with.
Okay.
I didn't really mention this here in my notes, but she keeps building up power, but she also learns that the world is going to end in these various ways, and all she can do is really wait for it. But then once it ends, it gets to this epic showdown between the two of them where if she beats him, she can turn everything back. So but it would build this
when you say turn everything back, but she can't turn back times, the time is still gone.
Well,
so all this time that she's gained these powers, she's not getting back.
Well, I had a way to figure it out in my head. I think I had it that I don't know, it's a long story. I don't want to say it too much because I had it envisioned, so if I ever do write it, I don't want to just spoil it all.
Oh, well, okay, fine. We could just put a spoiler siren on it, but since we're so far in...
I actually still haven't done a spoiler siren edit.
In once. Yes.
It's because I also just don't want to add another thing to edit. Once we have that big studio and I have all the buttons, I can just press sure.
Yeah, you can just press a button.
Okay.
Anyway.
But so somehow Io would gain godly power over time. I don't know how. I never got that far into planning. But basically, I'll write. This was my idea of I remember I came up with this idea. What if I had as epic a story as possible with as few characters as possible and hopefully the shortest name as possible. Hence Io.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you wanted to be really meta, you could just do I or you. That'd be really funny.
Well, if you're going to do just one letter titles, then you could just do the obvious Z or Q.
That's not obvious at all. That's just trying to stick out.
There's a movie literally called Pi, and it's not
Pi, the mathematical number.
It's literally the mathematical number pi, yeah.
Right, so it's not even 3 letters, it's just 2.
It's technically one letter, pi.
Well, if you use the Greek symbol, yes.
I think it's the Greek symbol is the name of the movie.
When we spell it in English, it is 2. Anyway.
It's Darren Aronofsky. That guy's weird. His movies are weird. Seen Black Swan, right?
I've read about it. I have not seen it.
Yes.
But we have no right to call somebody weird or not because.
No, I know you're right. His movies are very unusual, though.
Well, some people might call it visionary.
Also,
however,
it's hypocritical for me to call anyone weird. So, okay.
As far as I'm concerned, it depends on the scope of my story idea.
If you prefer this size cast or a different one, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A ranger team typically has few characters, but the story is not just the heroes, right? Once you add some good secondary characters that always get nerfed for obvious reasons, the villain faction, suddenly it's not that small anymore. Intimate sitcom types can excel in this model with the occasional guest star.
Right.
But space opera definitely would seem too limited if you had a cast of less than 10s. No. Hundreds? No. Thousands! Right?
I mean, it would seem like a very small universe if there was only six people.
It's too unrealistic if you don't have all of these various characters, even if you don't use them. I will say, though, for my main cast, I prefer to be around this size.
Yeah. Yeah, for the main cast.
You were talking about earlier how you focus on certain characters, even if the cast is not this small, but you focus on certain characters, and those are the ones we come to care about the most because we see them the most, they grow the most in front of us, and so this idea of a core unit of the cast, I like.
Right.
I just don't, because the characters have to be so strong and you kind of let the plot take a back seat by doing this, I don't actually like this kind of story very much. I'm not.
I can
good at writing
imagine,
them is
like-
probably the thing.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. It would be interesting to write one though. Like,
Yeah,
just
it would.
just
You
for-
would as a challenge, absolutely.
yeah.
I might have other side characters who come in for variety's sake, or to advance the story. But in the end, the ones I'd like to write have a core cast of this size, not the whole cast of this size.
Yeah.
For simplicity's sake, I better not go overboard.
Right.
At least until I've tried juggling more successfully, whether it's, too big or too small.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it definitely depends on the type of story too, like on what I would prefer. One that I guess the closest to like a story that I would write in a way, I guess like in terms of humor wise, that's like this. I guess this is a timely example because the sequel just came out, but Zombieland is
Oh, yeah.
for most of that movie it's just the four of them.
Well,
So-
and the occasional fodder to kill and stay
Yeah,
alive.
well, yeah, but like the zombies, if you count them, they're fine. But there's especially by the end, there's a bunch of them.
I mean,
but-
that's the thing. Like, what is required to be called a character? Is it a simple credit, Citizen Number 2? Is it literally being on screen?
those aren't
at
characters;
all?
those are background extras. But
Well, yes, but like, how literally do you take it? Because they are there. Yes.
I guess in this instance, like in Zombieland, I would say that all the zombies constitute one character,
Okay.
and that character
In that
being
case-
the antagonist. Like,
In that case, then you don't still have 5, and that I agree that still fits here. But if the zombies are disparate enough
yeah.
to, have certain like.
But
you
they
have
don't
this
really. I don't
group
think they're
on the
characters.
West
They don't
Coast,
affect the
this group
plot
on
at
the
all. They're
East
just
Coast.
obstacles. So
True. So, and this gets into the argument of what really constitutes a character, which we're not actually really arguing that today, are we?
I don't think so. Like I remember I've talked
Okay.
about like how, and speaking of that disaster movie. Actually, that was last episode we talked about that time we were talking about disasters as characters
Oh,
or
yes.
not, or different natural things as characters. But I remember I talked about that in Armageddon. The asteroid is kind of a character because they personify it so much. So
Well, and it's the thing you mentioned with Leon earlier.
Yeah.
He hangs over the entire thing even though he never appears.
So yeah.
So there are characters that don't have to show up to be counted. There are people who show up that don't have enough juice to be called a focal character. It's so weird. The definition seems to be fluid. That said,
That's what makes it great, though.
yeah, yep, to each their own. As the creator, you have the executive control.
Yeah.
Inspired by Donald's last point about does he prefer this? One question I thought of: is there a certain format best suited for this size cast?
Like,
The ones I came up with here, say episodic, like the sitcom, short story, like you mentioned with Io, or a saga. Although I figure
Saga would be damn difficult, but
Yes,
good luck to all of you that try.
Well, I mean, you have one as children. You have one as younger adults.
I guess that could be
20s.
like individually each book of the saga is a
But I
minimalist
think-
cast, but collectively, there's...
But I think that it's kind of hard to maintain a saga. Again, a very plot-heavy work when the character weight is so important.
right, exactly.
I prefer episodic or a one-shot, since you don't have to constantly find ways to keep reinventing your same extremely well-defined characters.
No, I definitely
to make
think
that work.
one-shot episodic sort of things are good too. I mean, like, I guess an instance that's very relevant to this podcast, the skits that we do. There's usually only 2 characters in them, you and me. Sometimes we add more, but it's never more than, like, 6. So.
It's never more than we can handle different voices, so it stays dumbed down.
Right.
Anyway,
So, yeah,
I just felt like bringing that
Yeah.
up because I think there are formats that are conducive to this kind of a cast.
Yeah, I agree.
Smaller projects, in particular, seem to be the big one. Because it's character driven. Once the character conflict is over, what, do you invent a new one?
That's true. Hold on. I'm going to Google search. What is the longest movie with the fewest characters?
Oh, the epitome of unprofessionalism here.
15 movies with 5 or fewer characters.
But you wonder, are those like film festival less than half an hour short type films, or are they like not, well, I guess no film really compares to Lord of
15.
the Rings,
Who's
Avengers,
Afraid of
Endgame.
Virginia Woolf? A classic that I have not read or seen.
I have not read that either. I heard of it, but I've never paid any
I've
attention
never
to
heard of a lot of these. Oh, The Blair Witch Project. I've heard of it, never seen it.
it. Yeah, ditto.
Before Sunrise, Monsters. What are these movies? Oh, Gravity. I've heard of that one.
Sandra Bullock, wasn't it?
Sandra
Ryan-
Bullock
was
and
it
George
Ryan
Clooney.
Reynolds? George
It's-
Clooney and Sandra Bullock. Okay.
And I think I've heard,
Ryan
spoiler
Reynolds, Sandra
alert for
Bullock was
Gravity,
Sandra
I heard he dies early on, so it's mostly just Sandra Bullock.
Well, and again with space, it's so vast, and if you're by yourself, you got to fill
Right.
the
That
time. We
makes it-
mentioned that on episode 61, so go back and listen if you want to. Or
Okay,
not.
I haven't heard any of these other movies, so who cares?
Well, I mean, and then, they likely haven't tripped your radar because
Films
they
with
don't
only
gross
2
enough.
characters or less.
They gross only so little, and so you don't care about them. But anyway, if you'll allow me,
127
the last
hours.
Segue. If you'll allow me the last segue, although that was, yeah, I guess that's a fairly prominent one, isn't it?
Yeah. Buried with Ryan Reynolds.
We have very minimal amounts left to say about this size of cast, so I think we should call it here.
Probably.
And
I mean, this
say,
episode's been
"That's
long
it for
enough.
this
What's it been, like
week."
30 minutes, 35? So,
Well, depending. I don't know how edits are going to
well, and plus, what was our skit this week? Was it it was the Runaway Plot Train. That'll add 6 or 7 minutes. So,
Well, I don't know how many. Anyway, so we'll call it here. That's it for this week. If you'd like to get in touch with us, ask us questions about how to do these size casts a little bit more, or run a concept by us, please do.
Yes.
If you want to do that, that is either through your own email or the contact page at the Matthew Donald Creator website. The address is mattd@Matthew Donald Creator. It will be spelled in the description if you're that worried. Please specify Donald or David, since Matt D could refer to either of us.
yes.
If you want to get in touch with Donald over there, how do you do that?
You follow me at Matthew Donald Creator on Facebook, Matthew Donald 64 on Twitter, and Matthew Donald 64 on Instagram. Why 64? Because that's how many punches my face can take from the average high school bully before I'm knocked out. I know this from experience, and not always from being in high school. From sometimes.
Sure, certainly not. Yes.
But like my nose is permanently unattached to my face, with only the skin keeping it from falling out. All the cartilage within it's just going all over. See, look here, touch it, move it around.
Oh, that's gross. I'm never touching that again.
That's all right. I got the last laugh by writing dumb books about dinosaurs with laser guns. Yeah, that'll show them.
But that's it for us this week at the
Yes.
with the show where two twits talk about writting. Thanks
I'm-
for listening. We'll
I'm
be
Matt
back
Donald.
with more next week. I'm Matt David. Until next time, keep writing,
Keep
listeners.
writing.
The Ridway.